Hello and welcome to The Numbers Guy. I'm Ron Stoffel, and I have a guest today from my city. I am a citizen of New Hope, and I have Dennis Holman here as a guest. He is also a friend and a member of the citizenship of New Hope and Robbinsdale School District, and we're going to be talking about some local issues here, some updates on one of our other shows that we had a couple of months or so ago on West Metro Fire, Joint Powers, what's going on. That seems to have now settled down, I believe. Haven't heard anything recently that any more blow-ups have occurred. And then an update on Robbinsdale area schools and some of the things that are going on with that. So thank you, Dennis, for coming on and talking with me as a citizen.
Thank you for inviting me. And when you mentioned Robbinsdale schools, that I know we're going into later, I attended Robbinsdale schools for my whole time in school, and I know you did too, I think.
Yep. I think we both graduated from the original Robbinsdale High School. Well, I mean, not the original. My parents went to the original on Regent. This was the one that's over at off of 36th and Regent and
right.
Toyota.
In fact, they never let me graduate.
Oh, they didn't?
No. I left after my junior year to go to Gustavus. They never let me graduate.
Oh my goodness.
No.
So you're not a high school graduate, but you have a college degree.
I am not a high school graduate. I got a college degree and a graduate degree. But Milo Melky was the principal back then, and he said I didn't have enough credits to graduate from high school, even though on my normal graduation date I would have, I had several college credits to my name.
Wow.
So
you're the first high school non-graduate that I've come out of that. You must have been able to pull some things with your college to be able to. They must not have required a college or a high school degree to get into college.
No, they didn't require a high school degree. All they required is good test scores and good grades. That was back when they were experimenting with some non-traditional kinds of things.
Well, we've kind of gone back to that also a little bit with
yeah.
all of that what we've going on with the college courses you can get in high school and everything. So
well, and I would say that my experiment was not as successful as it could have been. In other words, I'm not sure that all of the innovations that they put through the school system are for the benefit of students. Anyway, we can go into that another time.
Okay.
But let's
very interesting.
Let's focus on some local government issues.
All right. Well, as many of you know, over the last probably 7 or 8 months, the West Metro Fire Joint Powers, which is a joint powers between the City of Crystal and the City of New Hope, have been meeting. I think there were 7 or 8 different joint city council meetings that they had to resolve some issues that started with back, I think it was November. Crystal City Council decided that they thought that we may or may not want to continue with this joint powers, which means that previously, I think it's like 14 years it's been in existence, the cities of Crystal and New Hope have combined their fire protection and services where they had them previously separated together in a joint power. So each city council has, my understanding, is veto power over the 7-member board, which is made up of the city managers from each of Crystal and New Hope, a city council member from each of that. So that's 4 out of the 7 are government officials. And then 3 members were citizens. And Crystal, a number of years ago, decided that their citizen representative would be their mayor. So that means that they would have 3 government officials, 1 under the code of citizen representative, and then there was an at-large citizen member, and then New Hope had a citizen representative, and then they voted on the at-large. And now after the brouhaha, I'll call it, and the potential divorce, which was talked about before these meetings, the City of New Hope decided to even the playing field. They would promote another council member onto the board. So now we have 6 members that are 3 from each side, are from government, and we have a president or chairman of the board that is an at-large citizen representative. So these meetings have occurred. I think they worked out some of the issues with budgets and some conflicts between some of the board members and the chief of the fire department. I think there may be some personality conflicts and some communications issues going on. But the last I saw out of the Sun newspaper is that both councils have a joint resolution, which I believe was passed. I was looking for it before I came. I think it was passed by both of them. They're going to continue the marriage for a while. They're going to work on their differences. So I'm not sure if they're in counseling. I would call this kind of family counseling that occurred between them.
So a family relations dispute. You know, it's interesting that all this comes up, and I know it was reported that it came as a surprise to New Hope officials that there was even a problem.
Yes.
When this first came up, the New Hope officials were caught by surprise that Crystal would take this action. These two cities are right next to each other. I mean, their city halls, administrative offices can't be more than, what, a mile apart?
Mile or two.
Yeah.
And remember, also, I've been a long-term resident of here. They used to be Crystal and New Hope used to be the village of Crystal.
Okay.
51 years ago was when Crystal decided that they were going to become a city, and the voters decided if they were going to go with the city, and I think it had to do with water. From my understanding they were going to go with city water, and Crystal wanted to go with that, so they kind of split off and created their own city. And then New Hope stayed with the village and then ultimately turned into a city later on. But if you see the geography, it's based on a lot of squares, because a lot of those people had plots that were, maybe 10-acre or 5-acre squares or 20 acres. And it kept that going to this day, where you have some pockets where you can't tell the difference.
Well, and these two cities are so close together. In fact, they fit together like puzzle pieces. You'd think there would be some occasional discussion between the two cities,
You would think
particularly where there are joint services involved. So the fact that this all came up as a surprise is, well, to a voter, to an average resident, it's astounding that it came up as a surprise. But I'm glad to hear that things have been worked out. At least there's a truce in the whole thing, because I'd hate to see the savings that result from combination of services between two cities, as close as they are. I'd hate to see those savings evaporate by a split in service provision.
Yeah, because again, I haven't run the numbers, but I know they saved $250,000 when they combined, and that was 14 years ago.
Right.
Dividing these things up in what I'll quote unquote call the divorce decree, because they have 3 physical buildings. There's 3 stations.
Yeah.
2 of those are in Crystal, and 1's in New Hope. And I'm not sure, if there would be, we would go 3, split those up evenly.
Well, there'd have to be a study. They'd have to hire a consultant.
Yes,
They'd have to figure out how to divide up the assets, and then how to acquire the assets necessary by each city that came up short on the assets, and then, so on and so forth. It would
be a full employment for a couple attorneys and consultants, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm hoping that is going. But the issue that I have is my understanding is if the councils already have veto power over this joint board, why we have politics involved in the first place? Why don't we have citizen representatives on there making the decisions? In my mind, they're going to make better decisions on what an actual board is, rather than getting into these conflicts where, in my opinion, the members of the board are being operational rather than governance. And this should be a governance body, not a body that looks at if they're spending money on an engine this year versus next year. that's what you have chiefs and you have administrators for,
right.
just like in any other organization. And
Right.
they've gone beyond that. And I think they need to be let know that they have governance. They're not in there to be running the operation.
Right, yeah. Micromanagement by government officials never seems to serve the public.
Right? So hopefully that one is resolved. We'll find out. I know, unfortunately, the fire chief has taken a leave of absence. Hopefully everything is going well with him. I think they might have been medical related or whatever, but I know they got an interim, and best wishes to him that he'll come back, and hopefully everything gets resolved. And I know they're putting together, which I know is in your area of expertise in HR. I was surprised that they didn't have a procedure for grievances, that they now are creating some type of HR joint within this joint powers that wasn't talked about because they've had some grievances and they don't know how to handle them. So I thought that was kind of unique, whereby we've created this and then all of a sudden we have some grievances and we don't know how to do it. You know.
Yeah, I mean...
communications, again, I think is an issue here that wasn't resolved.
Communications, grievance resolution, how people get along is basic HR stuff.
Right.
And both cities have human resource professionals,
Right.
Or managers.
I would think that they would help them out.
That
so.
should be able to help out a little bit on those issues. That shouldn't be an issue.
I wouldn't think so either. So, the next issue we'd like to talk about is on the Robbinsdale area schools, kind of an update on where we're at with that. The school year obviously ended, and we'll be coming up with a new within, I think they're a little bit past halfway mark in our summer vacation for students. So hopefully everybody's gearing up for that. Hint, hint. The first area that I'd like to talk about would be the new magnet school called SEA, which stands for Science, Engineering, and Arts, which also, quote unquote, was the STEAM magnet school, which was Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math, that was put in the Olson building. The final numbers have been tallied, I believe. I didn't bring them with me, but they have 3 sections of K through 4th grade filled for that. And then they'll have 2 sessions or 2 classrooms for 5th grade, which was kind of the plan. Unfortunately, the way the numbers came out, they didn't quite meet their numbers for diversity. The school will not look like the rest of the district. They were trying to create a lottery system whereby the students that were going into this new magnet school would better represent from a demographics, both Caucasian versus children of color and social economic conditions. And many of, I think there was 1 or 2 of the grade levels that became closer, but overall it's better than the Spanish immersion, so they're making progress. I think they're at 25% versus 10 to 15% socioeconomic and minority students. So they've done a better job of it, but it still is going to look different than the rest of the district. So I think we'll have to find out how in the future they do that. And the lottery system, I know the person that ran it sounded like the computer almost overheated because of the different geographies and the different pools of people there. Unfortunately, they found out that the cost of remodeling and bringing it up to code is a little bit higher than they projected, which means I believe that it may be more costly on the front end here than they anticipated, which means rather than 10 years down the road, it won't start making money until probably the 11th or 12th year. And they aren't getting as many students, it doesn't look like, from outside the district. They did say that they're getting, I think, 6 or 7 resident students that came back to the district. They were very happy to see that. But the number of non-residents didn't meet the number that was necessary to support this. So I'm interested to see how they might spin this and if they're going to be able to fill the positions in the other schools, because they took a lot of students out of Forest, which was overcrowded a little bit.
Okay, let me go back and just help me understand. Is this a voluntary program? I mean, the people who get into C, who jump into the C, Are they volunteers or is this a random selection?
It was a lottery system, and there was different levels of lottery. They started with kindergarten, and they filled the kindergarten, and they had criteria such as they were trying to get as many spots available for non-residents, and I think it was
Okay.
meaning students that were not residents of Robbinsdale area schools. They wanted certain seats held for them.
But the students that go into these schools, are they, is there any self-selection or are students placed in these schools? In other words, do
Okay.
they get to volunteer to go into these schools or are they placed in the schools?
Nope, it's an application process. So there
Okay,
was
it
the parents normally would
Right.
apply for admission
Okay.
to the school.
Okay.
And then there was 6 layers, I think, in many of these as to which category you may fit in, and you could fit in more than one category. Obviously, a non-resident who was a student of color could have their spot in 2 different lottery pools, shall we say, versus a Caucasian who was a resident may fit in, or if you were at a school that was a high population, which was a special one for Forest School because of the overcrowdedness they had some special. That's why I said there was a computer. It took them, I believe, 3 months of gyrations. And again, once you were picked, you still had to then say that, yes, I want to. So you were selected, and then you still had an ability to back out or not. And then there was preferences for a member of the same family, which they had the same thing. So if a kindergartner got in and you had an upper grade, like a 4th grader,
Okay.
there was another slot for that. Also for teachers, there was a preferential for teachers. In other words, if you were selected to be a teacher here and you had a student, you also had a preferential treatment there in one of the lottery pools. So it was more complicated, I think, than the Olympics or the World Cup pooling method that
Right.
was going on there. So again, from my understanding, it was more complex and they had some glitches. Again, this is the first year that they've done it for 2 because, again, each year for the Spanish immersion, we have kindergarten admission that is run under the pool method. This is the first time we've opened an entire school based on that. So I think they've kind of learned a little bit, but it seemed to be, it'll be interesting because I think the operations of it costs will be higher. From a capital, I haven't seen the operating, and it appears that the revenue might not be quite what they had anticipated. And that assumes that any of the non-residents that came out of one of the schools, elementary, again, this is an elementary program, out of one of the other schools that they'll be able to refill with a non-resident. Otherwise, all we've done is move it from Forest to Olson, and we haven't gained any revenue, which they said that this was a revenue-driven. It was in their budget committees. It was all based on revenue, which surprises me a little bit because I thought it was K-12 was education-based.
Yeah. So, is the purpose of the C school, sounds like a naval term, but is the purpose of the C school to increase achievement in these particular areas for the students that attend the school?
Yes, I
Or
think
is there a I mean,
there
what,
is,
what is
and
the
again,
purpose?
there are state mandates now coming down in science. You know, there always has been,
Right.
obviously, in math and engineering. So the state of Minnesota is creating a criteria and graduation standards and everything in these levels. So all the students, no matter if they're in C or not, are going to have criteria, and there's supposed to be curriculum associated with that. This is just a higher concentration of it, is my understanding. And it was quoted as being kind of an incubation area that will then be able to be brought to the other 8 elementary schools that we have in our district. And I know we had this experiment with Technology Learning Campus, TLC, for middle school. 10 or so years ago that kind of had that same thing to begin with, never got anywhere. So I'm a little skeptical of this. I think it's going to turn into another elitist type school that's going to cost more than they projected, not bring in the revenue. And in my mind, if they don't bring in the revenue and it's higher cost and we have limited resources, that has to come from other places, which means the other elementary schools get shortchanged, which I was at the meetings and advocated, why can't we have these programs in each of the elementary and hit a higher population? Because this population is around 400. So 400 students have this opportunity to excel in this area. And there is somewhat of a contract, but if it doesn't work out either for the students or for the teachers, they have the ability to go back to their home school after 1 or 2 years without any penalties. So it's an experiment that seems to be catching on in some other areas. I know that there was, I believe it's in Mounds View, that a STEM school, which was a science, technology, engineering, math, turned into a STEAM school. And again, Robbinsdale has always had a strong arts, and that was a criteria that this had to have arts in it. I'm not sure why it has such a high concentration.
That's another thing I'm curious about. You know, every once in a while, when I was in school or college or whatever, they'd have some sort of a test that would say which of these does not belong, and they'd give you a number of terms, and you had to pick the one which didn't fit with the others. That's where the A comes in my mind. When you're talking about science, technology, engineering, math, how does arts get infused into that system? I don't know if you got an answer to that, but
from my understanding, it was
fit.
Because the arts program and those types of things have been depleted from the elementary levels. And again, I think that creativity, that side of it fits into what you're talking about. I'm not sure if the word arts, and again, I have not seen the curriculum. I'm on the Systems Accountability Committee, which all of the curriculum is supposed to come through. We haven't seen anything on this yet. This is, from my understanding, they're still putting it together. It's going to take several years of evolution because they're taking what I would consider to be textbooks and supplementing them with, I know they're meeting with, over at the University of Minnesota, some areas over there. They're working with the Perpich Arts High School, how to mingle these together, because this is a relatively new experiment, and I'll call it an experiment. And I think they have kind of too. And that's a little concerning with our achievement gap. If we haven't gotten that down yet, I don't know if we need to be experimenting with something that I don't know if this is going to help the achievement gap. And if it does, it helps it for 400. And does the other ones get pushed to the wayside and overall we're in worse condition? In my mind, the dollars should be going into the classroom, working on the basics, which is reading, writing, mathematics. Science and technology are important. They're
but
proper
you need the
place.
basics in order to excel in those areas.
And again, I haven't seen the standards that the state is coming out with. And again, I think that's another evolution that's coming out. And again, I know, in business and everywhere, those are becoming, I'll say, areas that you need to have basic knowledge in. I'm not sure this high concentration is necessary at this point in time. And again, in my mind, okay, we're doing this at the elementary level. I haven't seen how this integrates into middle school and senior high.
Sounds like somebody. It sounds like a situation where somebody had a bright idea and was able to convince a number of other people to go along with it, without even thinking about the details and the implementation. And now, enough people have bought into it that they're basically stuck with trying to implement something that maybe wasn't well enough thought out in the first place.
And again, this came out of a budget committee that the school administration put together, so it's to enhance revenue. And that scares me that we're looking for that rather than, again, what is our kids learning? And if they're not, if we have a large achievement gap, which we do in Minnesota in our district.
In our district, yes.
Why aren't we tackling that before we go into these ancillary areas that will help small numbers of students?
Right.
Even if, 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road this can be implemented, we could have a larger achievement gap where we could have put this money, because it is, in my mind, taking from other areas where we have scarce resources. So, maybe they have some grants. Again, that free money that maybe the federal or the state government is going to give them that'll supplement it. But so I think the verdict is out in my mind as to that. If that's going to be, it's going to take a couple of years, I think, for that to filter out to determine if it's a good thing or not. But I'm still skeptical of it. The other thing I'd like to talk about, which has been in the press recently, is some behavioral issues both at our middle schools. There have been some parents and citizens who have had some concerns with Robbinsdale Middle School, and those have been put in the listening sessions both in May and June, whereby it appeared that the parents did not think that the administration and the principal at Robbinsdale were listening to some of their issues, and that seems to be being listened to a little bit more. But then I also was told a while ago that Plymouth has an issue where the principal may not be looking at it very seriously, where there were some students who were hazed or bullied on a 8th grade field trip. The 8th graders take several days to do in the winter months. And 3 of the students were bullied by 3 or 4 students to the extent of potentially some urine being doused on one of the students' legs and bullied. And that seems to not have been resonated up, because as far as I know, the administration outside of Plymouth does not know. So we have some things that are going on behavioral-wise that seems to be being taken and maybe being lids put on them so it doesn't get out to the general population. So I'm just trying to figure out where this would go, because I know you're HR. It seems like there's a communications issue going on where I would think with all the bullying, we hear about this, that this is an issue, but then when it happens in your own district, it's kind of determined that it's not as important.
Maybe not as important, swept under the rug. We don't want to be identified as a school that is unruly or has behavioral problems, so we're not going to address it. Middle school, as you're aware of, having been, gone through middle schools, is where things start getting a little rambunctious. Students start, thinking more that they're more mature than their development has taken them, and start getting into, let's say, more serious issues. And unless there is behavioral control, things can easily get out of hand.
Yep.
Particularly if administration is not willing to address them, nip things in the bud, so to speak.
Yep. So more on that will be coming up. And as always, our time flies by as we're talking. I appreciate coming out, Dennis, and talking over these issues. And to everybody out there, please keep engaged in your local politics at any level. And again, we have elections coming up on August 14th. Please go out and vote. Thank you for viewing us.